Good morning, everybody, and good morning to you, Eugene. And Eugene, thanks a lot for granting us interview with you, HFX, and co-owner of HFX Systems. And thanks for the interview.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Morning, Nimrod. I'm here sitting here awaiting what you've got to ask me about HFX, and I suppose you want to know a bit about us in the past, but off to you. You
Yes.
can fire up.
Yeah, thanks, Eugene. Yeah, I think first of all, everybody will be interested more in Eugene. So if you can tell us more about you and maybe HFX, and then of course, I think it's also your hobby, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, the hobby has got out of hand at an early stage in my life, and that must probably dictated my future for me in a way. If I go back, it's started in the late school years as the interest in audio and in music really took over, and even throughout university I continuously pursued that and maintained that interest, as well as collecting music and enjoying listening to that, and getting more and more interested in the hardware that reproduces and brings us this pleasure and joy in life. So much so that besides little projects of embarking, building speakers and all sorts of other small hi-fi pieces of equipment that we put together over the years, it became a part-time business through the after finishing university. In the army days, in those days, I worked on weekends when there was an opening in hi-fi shops, and come the day that I had to return to my real job, I basically went back to resign and started out on this journey into the hi-fi world. In the mid-80s, this was a very different playing ground. It was much simpler. It came from an era out of the 70s where it was basically a turntable, an amplifier and a pair of speakers. And the most complex technical challenge you might have had as a salesman in those days was to fit a cartridge to a turntable. Then came compact disc, and even that skill wasn't required anymore all of a sudden. But as by the nature of my interest in audio, we've developed over the years and pursued a higher ground of audio, so to speak, very much. And that's led to where we are today in HFX.
100%, yeah, no, it's quite a journey, Eugene. Tell us then, just for interest's sake, which of the brands are you doing at the moment?
Well, we've got a wide selection of brands. It's when we started out in the late 80s, as HFX, then it was Hi-Fi Excellence. HFX is an acronym for that name in a way. Okay. It's a bit of history there. We were outright a retail store. And out of the retail, we developed a strong affinity with certain brands. Bowers & Wilkins at the time was one of our main brands. It was not represented up in the northern part of South Africa, so to speak, Johannesburg, which typically is a very busy center for hi-fi, so to speak, or a good hunting ground, if you want to say that. The product was then at the time distributed out of Cape Town, very much Cape Town based. Bowers & Wilkins was our first acquisition as a distributed product, so to speak. Shortly thereafter followed Marantz and then Mark Levinson in those days. This was in very early 90s, 1990, 94, 95. That we've built up over the years with brands as they come along, and we supplemented with with a lot of other good brands. Even Bowers & Wilkins grew. Class A Audio came out of that. We went from that, moving on into Marantz. Marantz expanded themselves. There were some speaker brands that they dabbled with, but we never veered away from Bowers & Wilkins, which is our core brand. Supplemented to that over the years, Macintosh, Audio Laboratories out of the US. Great product, a huge selection of products, which is a fantastic company to deal with, and a brand as such. They also affiliated and acquired Sonus Faber in the last couple of years. Have had a very strong and working relationship. So Sonus Faber came in a way by default to us, I want to say, but we developed a great partnership with them, and we love the product, and it slotted very nicely in for us in the higher end, so to speak, in our mixture of products. Above Bowers & Wilkins, where Bowers & Wilkins would end off with the 800, we can then step into the Ilchromanices and the Liliums and Aida territory. So that made a lot of sense for us to bring Sonus Faber along. The JBL range, Synthesis in particular, has been a very, very strong brand for us. Synthesis with a big focus on cinema reproduction. But inside JBL, we've also come to learn that there's some fantastic hi-fi product. And we have been pursuing that in bringing it to market in the country. It's never really been well presented in South Africa. And over the last 10, 15 years, I think we've made a bit of a mark with their products Everest, K2, out of their Array series, there was some superb product. And then latest acquisitions that is exciting for us, TechDAS, Turntables, the big return to vinyl. It's been a big, how can I say it, back to basics exercise in some ways for us, to what territory we were so familiar with, that we grew up in the 70s and 80s, went totally dead and was off the chart for many years. But you can't keep a good thing down, I suppose. We've seen a fantastic rejuvenation of that format. It is better than ever. It is really delivering for our clients superb results. And yeah, we've brought CD in some systems to a standstill virtually with TechDAS. TechDAS is a very sophisticated product, supplemented with very good quality arms. They don't do tone arms, but once you got the package together, the tone arm, the turntable and the cartridge, off to your phono stage and into your system, you're ready for some really exciting time.
Yeah, I hear you. And what cartridges do you do?
We do the Autophon brand. Autophon has been with us since I can remember hi-fi. And besides that, I think they've celebrated the 100 years, I think, is coming up, or has just been, that they've been around in cartridges. If we look at Autophon, we've been distributing Autophon again from the late 90s, early 2000s, somewhere there, when Turntables started to make a comeback, or there was some
revival.
Yeah, a bit of revival that was coming, and we also, we might have been involved even earlier than that, just as a support. I can't recall the dates exactly. But Autophon, a great brand, fantastic. The big thing and big advantage that Autophon has above many of the other manufacturers is, besides their rich history and ability, they can really build a high-end cartridge at most probably significantly reduce the numbers in terms of cost, as opposed to some of these other exotic brands that are out in cartridge manufacturing. So they bring great value, high performance to many clients, and a great company altogether to deal with. Yeah.
I hear you. And do you perhaps have a specific, let's say, favorite cartridge in the range?
Sure. Favorite cartridges is a dangerous thing to mention, but it depends what you're putting together, I suppose, and what you're aiming for. But there's, out of the Cadenza range, Cadenza Bronze, I think, gives you a superb value for money. That is one cartridge that stands out for me. It's got a reasonable high output voltage, so gain into a phono stage, especially if you haven't got a super exotic, ultra quiet phono stage with very high gain. It is quite a nice match into the broad-based phono stages that's out in the market. So you going in with a reasonable, decent input voltage into a phono stage helps a lot. Keeps noise down, great dynamics, beautiful sound, and reasonably affordable. So it's not ultra exotic, high-end prices. If we go to the top cartridges, the A95 stands out from Autophon as a very special cartridge. And then stepping out of that, going to TechDAS, there's a very interesting cartridge in the TechDAS TI, the titanium versions. Those bring again some of the qualities, slightly higher output voltage, great match into valve phono stages, works exceptionally well.
Oh, very good, very good. Thanks, Eugene. And then tell us, I know we're going to slightly back in time, but do you still have equipment that is reminiscent for you, or one that you still keep from your early days, let's say from your student days or your very first system? Is there maybe a component that is still very special to you that you can remember, or that you still perhaps own? Maybe something about that.
Yeah, you got those little standout things. It's a funny game, this, in that you often sound that you grew up with, or that you remember those, how can I put it, those moments, those wow moments that you can recall from your distant youth, so to speak. You know, a pair of AR-18s with a NAD 3020 amplifier and either a Lin or a Riga turntable at the time. That kind of experience is so embedded in your memory that you want to believe that sound was the best that you ever heard, and you're always trying to recreate or re-achieve that sensation and experience that you had, or moment. So as components go in our archive, I keep a couple of components. Indeed, yeah, I've got an original NAD 3020 amplifier, beautiful condition, fully operational. So that one stands out for me because that was the early days when we got involved. AR-18s at home, I've got a pair of AR-20s, the slightly better version, came with a dome tweeter. So that is still in my collection. The couple of Nakamichi tape decks that we're hanging on to. The sound is okay, it's not fantastic, but at the time it was wonderful, and that was our medium. It was our convenience medium that we carried over into the cars, and we judged car systems with. So it was a critical component. A properly recorded cassette was the source into a motor car system, which we also dabbled in our student days. All of us have most probably been there.
Then, if we can talk a little bit more technical, I know you're quite involved, you're quite a hands-on person, you are closely involved with the projects. So I think one of the main challenging today is the room acoustics. So I know this is a very specialized field, but I think you can also call yourself quite a specialist in that. The reason behind it is because you've treated so many rooms. So just in general, what is your take on room acoustics, and what are the things that you've learned over the years, and maybe things that you've applied that caused?
Well, the big thing is, for any proper result to be achieved in audio, the environment in which you will be reproducing is going to play a fundamental role to the sound that you will achieve. The loudspeaker manufacturer, electronics manufacturers, most of their stuff is of quite a high standard already, well tested, well proven, and lives up to the specification they claim. So if you were to analyze a piece of equipment, you would pretty much get an idea already from a good manufacturer what is capable of delivering to you. It is now up to you to place that piece of equipment in a conducive environment. Unfortunately, we go back home and we unpack with great expectation, anticipation, fire it up, and maybe it's not as great as what you thought it would be, or could have been, or should have been. Have you given thought on the room acoustics, the placement of the equipment? So here we start. Fundamentals is important: room width, length, height. The three basic elements that we first need to look at. What is the physical size that you will be dealing, and the physical nature of the environment. If one has got the luxury of putting something together, as you quite rightly say, we've been fortunate that we were involved in many projects where we could build rooms for clients and has assisted in that. Once you determined what you will place into this room and accommodate, so to speak, may that be the speakers, may that be furniture, people, etc., that will typically give you a length dimension and a width dimension. The one dimension that's so critical in acoustics and in audio, good audio, is the height. And unfortunately, most people do not have the luxury of being able to change the height, or it is a given and a fixed dimension in a room. Because you move into a house and you're sitting with a 2.8 meter high ceiling, and you might have a 6 meter wide room and 7 or 8 meters long. That height proportion is totally incorrect, and you got to deal with that. That's a critical element that one has got to look at. So either you may have early reflections from a ceiling or a concrete slab or something above. That's one area we normally start, the primary areas, looking up firstly into the roof, into the ceiling, see what is going on there. Secondly, to the side walls. If there's no symmetry there, it becomes very, very difficult to establish a proper focused image on your sound to create that kind of 3D dimension of depth and a real manifestation of of a centralized image for vocals and things like that. Because you'll have differences in the reflections that are coming off the different areas. Treating those, personally, I'm very opposed to anything foam related. I'm not a foam person. I hate foam, just to put it mildly. I think one needs to look at slightly broader band diffusion, keep some energy, that reasonable amount of energy alive in the room. Don't over dampen. That's a big mistake. Materials that will be used, and analyze each of the materials, because they will have very specific acoustic properties. May that be that curtains has got a very absorptive tendency in a specific frequency range, very narrow band, so you can end up with a suck out in the voices, or certain instruments that literally will just about disappear if they fall into that frequency band. Be mindful of carpets, looking at the type of carpets and how much of carpet you'll be using. Hard furniture, hard glass is terrible, unfortunately, highly reflective, yet it allows low frequency to escape through it, and you lose a lot of energy in the room, or low frequency energy impact. There are many factors, but the starting points for me when you go into a room is I look up to the ceiling, because that's normally an area that's clean and easily treatable. Second to that would be what's going on right behind me. Is it open, or is there a highly reflective surface right behind me that I need to address? Left and right of the speakers in your primary areas. Certainly it's not easily doable in a lounge or living environment, because you have to accommodate life, so to speak, or a family into it. Right behind the loudspeaker, consider that. Think about that back and forth moment, at roughly 340 meters a second that sound travels. It heats back, it comes back to you a second time from the speaker. In a very short space of time, and it will clutter up and kill good quality fidelity, so to speak. Don't want to absorb it totally, because then it becomes lifeless. So it's a very careful balance about what you should be looking at. Acoustics, and to make yourself out an expert, there's no golden formula yet, hasn't been devised, but there's certainly some fundamentals which you should be mindful and you should consider and address when you're setting up a system. And the more you can implement them, the more you will be rewarded. Better, good quality acoustic implementation is most probably one of the biggest rewards versus the money spent that you'll get out of your system.
No, thanks for that insights, Eugene. I can hear from your narrative that a lot of experience in there. Then I know quite recently we started using a DSP, or it's actually been out there quite a bit, but these days it's at a level that you can actually, how can I say, do a lot to improve the room acoustics. So what is your experience on DSP? And I know there's some recent products that you are quite excited about.
I hear you say you can improve the room acoustics. No, you can compensate for inadequacies in the room acoustics. That's most probably the more accurate description. Room acoustics can only be improved physically, but if you have to compensate, you can compensate inside the electronics most probably, and that's what we're quite excited about. It's a combination of things that we look at. There's many products out there. DSP has been around. Yamaha was the early guys, and I suppose there's others that I might not even know of. But just thinking back in my memory, going back, if I recall, is it a DSP 1000 or 10,000, if I think it was in the very early 80s, that was out from Yamaha, and they had all the hall modes that you could reintroduce into your system. It was still the day of equalizers and everything else that we used in our systems. The DSP has certainly developed and drastically, and the ability of manufacturers to incorporate it into the equipment to be conducive and supplementary for the end user to achieve a better result has certainly grown and become accepted in a way in high-end audio for end consumers. In the professional environment, it's been used for many years. If you talk about just live events and concerts and things like that, for those guys, it's been a given and a tool that they needed. We've had this purist approach in high-end audio and audio less is more. You know, get out all the clutter. The tone controls disappeared. Short circuit part, direct buttons in the front, audio direct on the front of an amplifier to bypass any unnecessary circuitry. So you go to DSP and we go the total opposite again of that, and we start to introduce manipulation of signal and conversion from analog to digital into the digital domain to process, reintroduce back into analog so you and I can hear it as an end result. But I can assure you that in a well implemented and carefully with not excessive use of it, you can certainly improve the performance of most listening environments dramatically, given you use a good quality product. There's a couple of components that we work with, specifically one that comes to mind from Turntables audio and the multi-channel environment and the cinema environment, where we're dealing with so many loudspeakers placed throughout in a venue or a room or a cinema, optimizing the performance in each given position, because as we place these loudspeakers, they might not be in their optimal or best location, but you need them to take up a role in that given position to create the effect and the experience of the cinema effect, and what the director wanted to achieve, or the film wanted you to experience as such. So these DSP devices developed heavily inside the cinema environment initially for us. It has come across into the stereo environment, where we're finding stereo products that can do that. So in essence, A, you've got to deal with a good quality product. B, understand exactly what its intentions is and how it's supposed to work. These things are very complex. There's many aspects involved in that. And also, how do you embark upon that? For us, typically, the process would be A, analyze the room, know what you're dealing with. So take basic measurements in your room, get familiar with those. Even if you do a standard simplified frequency sweep, getting a test disc, 20 Hertz, 22, 25, 28, 30, take an SPL meter in your listening position, take some measurements, see what's happening. 50% of the problems is in the low frequency area, under 100 Hertz for any hi-fi. If you get it right under 100 Hertz, you are in good territory. You're going to achieve results. So do those basic tests, draw yourself a little graph, see how you vary across. Once you determine that, you know more or less and does it also relate back to what you're hearing? So I'm listening to music, and I find the bass is a bit low, yet I can hear a bit of a rumble, but I don't really get the impact on the low frequency, which might have occurred here between 40 and 60 to 70 Hertz. Once you start to look at your graph, you see, oh yeah, but there's some 30 Hertz present in the room, but we got a suck out or a dip here that starts at 40 and it maintains all the way down to 50 and it comes back up towards 60 a bit later. And if there's and that might be a room fundamental, where you're dealing with a specific given dimension into your room. It could be the seated position where you are sitting. Is it optimal in terms of the base? So move around, you can walk around a bit in the room and take some measurements. Once you determine that, we know now, get a bit of an analysis on the room itself. We know what we're dealing with. You can't just go in blind and start twiddling buttons and moving a DSP process of equalization around unknown to what you're dealing with. First analyze, then look at what your strategy will be. Is it got to be a physical one? Are we moving speakers? Are we relocating our listening position? No, we can't. Now we've got to deal with what's going on above the line. Above the line, any abnormalities, excessive low frequency that sits above your 0 dB line can be worked on. So for us, don't force something or try to force something that doesn't exist. You're never going to recreate it. Below the line, meaning if we've got a 3 dB or 6 dB or 9 dB drop around 30 to 40 Hertz, but we've got a bump at 60 Hertz, well, we can't because it will repeat actually if it's, so let's say we got a rise of frequency, we had a 28 was very dominant up to 34, then we started to fall away and we had a suck out At 35, that suck out will sort of manifest again around about 70 hertz, 75 hertz. But above the line you can trim to try and linear it out. So rather kill what there's too much of. You can't reintroduce what there ain't. Don't force that too much.
No, thank you, Eugene. Yes, I think that was quite insightful as well. I can clearly hear that there's a lot of things that one can do around room acoustics.
Indeed.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Yeah, that was then part one of our exciting visit with Eugene from HFX. I'm sure you guys will find it fascinating, all the information that he shared with us. For me personally, it was really interesting, and I know myself and Teresa learned quite a lot. So guys, we'll be posting part 2 soon, so be on the lookout for that. Thanks again for watching. This is myself, Nimrod, and Teresa signing off for the audio couple. Thanks guys, have a good one.